Tonight, Lords is here. Tonight, Lords is undercover as a referee. Alrighty. Alrighty. Time to get this show on the road. So tonight's story is brought to you in part by dpwr.net for the Denis dates, uruarchives.com for the surface history corresponding to the Denis dates, and the Governian calendar converter, which is written by Brett Middleton of the Fuzzy Physics Institute for converting between Denis and surface time. Tonight's story is from Mist, the Book of Tiana. As we've progressed through the stories of the kings, we've seen many changes in the Denis culture. We saw an austere lifestyle that began with King Rinaref, supplanted by greed and avarice that began with King Shomat. We saw devotion to Yavo and a single faith, supplanted by diverse religions and religious beliefs numbering over 2,000, diminishing to just a handful by the end of Kareth's reign. Because of the writings of a martyred, self-proclaimed prophet named Gish, we saw their belief system being hijacked and steered away from the words and teachings of Yavo. And with King Jeren, Kareth's grandfather, we saw how the classes had become the most divided in their history. Yet the more violent factions in Denis decided to follow Yavo more closely and hope for a peaceful solution for their differing point of view regarding outsiders. Gish's writings resulted in a conservative culture within Denis society, a culture that held the Arotanti, or outsiders, with great disdain and contempt. This general attitude among the Denis was another contributing factor in the demise of a once great empire. We looked at the Mede-Dis War, which occurred during the early 8th millennium of Denis history. It was a war that was, once again, started by violent factions who were vehemently against contact with the Arotanti. This prejudice, though not held with the same violent emotions, was still felt by the majority of Denis society, a society that was very ethnocentric as well as xenophobic. These feelings and opinions remained prevalent up to the fall. We learn about Agarus, the architect of the fall. His motives were not ethnocentric, nor did they stem from xenophobia. He was driven strictly by revenge. Revenge for being wrongly accused and convicted of a crime he did not commit. Revenge that drove him to commit genocide against his own people, a character flaw that would spell the end of an empire. Also there were the beginnings of Atris, one of the heroes of the fall, the excavation of the great shaft, and of a friendship with Viovis, who would become a villain of the fall. We learn about a surface dweller named Anna, her life and how she came to find the cavern, and those same old Denis fears of the Arotanti, and their possibly corrupting influence on the Denis populace. We learned of Anna's time in prison, her learning the Denis language, and of her uncertain future as the five lords debated what was to be done with her. We learned how Anna came to live with Atris' parents while the five lords were deciding, and how Viovis, through his arrogance, assumed Anna would not come to his first book celebration. We learned how Atris took exception to his friend's snubbing of Anna, and in turn snubbed his friend for making him choose between the two. And finally deciding to write an age with Anna, and how after living and working together they fell in love, and how that love alienated Viovis, causing his anger to burn brighter than ever, and bring an end to his friendship with Atris. We learned about the origins of the Watcher Sanctuary, how Guildmaster Kadish had purchased a sanctuary in Urkana, and then built Annonay in order to perpetuate the lie that he was the grower, as he fancied himself to be. We learned about the birth of Gen, and how Agarus was a master forger. And we learned how Agarus' forgeries led to the distrust between Atreus and Veovis, and the latter's becoming accused and convicted of a crime he did not commit, stripping him of all he had known. This brought great shame, not only on him, but on his family as well. In fact, the shame was so great, it ultimately affected his father's health, hastening an early death. In addition to this, his friend Suiner could not be found. As Veovis' trial ended, so too did his father's life come to a close. Though Atreus blamed himself for setting the great wheels of the Denis state in motion, wheels that could crush a man as easily as their great hammers pound the rock, it was actually Agarus that set this masterful, though evil, plan into motion. We learn about Gen's early years and how his relationship with his mother went from being very close, basically he was a mama's boy, to becoming distant, and his becoming enamored of the knowledge possessed by the guilds, in turn causing him to start identifying more with his Denis heritage than his Arotanti heritage. In short, the beginnings of his pride. We watched as Agarus' plans for revenge began to unfold. He and Veovis committed various acts of terror in Denis, using linking books that had been stolen from the various guilds. Anna had followed Veovis to his and Agarus' redoubt, and saw their plans, knowing that she had to stop them there and then. She was setting a trap when she watched in horror as her beloved Atreus was thrown into a cage, suspended over the murky green sea of their secret age. We learn of Agarus and Veovis' plan to start a revolt among the lower classes of Denis. If it weren't for Anna's plan to stop it, they might have succeeded. Fortunately, she was able to destroy their cache of linking books and blank books, while making off with Agarus' journal. She was able to set a fire to the books, but not before being shot by Veovis, but managed to trap him in the ensuing inferno. She was able to link back to Denis, right into the middle of a meeting of the Five Lords. Veovis followed her even though he was on fire from her trap, and was immediately caught. Sorry about the crackling. My cooling fan on my laptop has decided to make a lot of noise right at this particular moment. Now, I should be coming back if I do poof. The laptop's not in danger of overheating, it's just making a lot of noise. Anyways, back to the recap. Last time we learned about the sentencing of Veovis, his escape, his poisoned dart, and the fall of Denis. Tonight's story opens on the 8th day of the 3rd month in the Denis year of 9400, July 12th, 1744 AD, the day that brought the end to Denis and destruction to the cavern. The last day of the Guild College term was an open day, where the students' parents were allowed to be there. This was a special day as Gen had been chosen to represent the college and read a passage from the history of the Guild of Books, his guild. The days of sickness, of being bullied and of crying himself to sleep out of his homesickness were long past. He had grown to become a rather strong child, as well as very tall for his age. He had gained a lot of confidence in his 4 years in the guild. Unfortunately, it came at a price. He was emotionally distant with his mother, part of him still not having forgiven her for abandoning him years before, when he was sent away to live at the guild. When Atris and Anna showed up to see their son, he greeted her with the same respect and emotion that he would have shown a classmate's mother. To make this day even more special for our young lad, Atris informed him that Guildmaster Rajana had said that he would be eligible for private tuition. This was a special day indeed. Gen had finished his speech, and Guildmaster Rajana stepped up to the podium addressing the parents when the building shook. Some members of the audience rose to their feet. Then the building shook again. Dust fell from the ceiling. Outside, the great bronze bell started to sound. There were only 2 reasons for that bell to ring: at the death of one of the 5 lords, or a threat to Denis itself. The last time it rang was due to the death of Viovis's father, Lord Ricaeri. Today it was because of a threat. As the people exited the guild hall, they could see a dark cloud emerging from a crack in the far wall. As the cloud spread out over the lake, the light-emitting algae died, dimming the cavern. At Atris' request, Anna took Gen to their age of Gemedet. Atris headed for the guild house to see what he could do to help. Anna sent Atris' mother, Tessera, to Gemedet as well. Callis went with the lords and the Grand Masters to one of the guild ages to discuss what should be done. Atris returned home with a breathing cylinder, and he and Anna linked to Gemedet together. The lords had ordered everyone to stay away for 10 days. Then some of the guilds would return to Denis to see if it was safe for the population to return. Meanwhile, on Agura, a familiar cloaked figure saw the coming cloud and its effect on the lake algae. Hearing the screams of its victims echoing across the water, he knew he had to flee. He grabbed a number of linking books, as well as the linking book to the only place he knew he would be completely safe. Quickly he made his way to the Canyon Mall. Once there, he ducked into one of the shops. His shop. His years of paranoia had apparently paid off. He had amassed an immense amount of wealth over the years, and had it safely stashed away in a private, secure age. We do not know if he kept the various door and chamber locks in that age engaged at all times. Regardless, once he was safely there, no one would be able to follow him past the Lincoln area. There would be nowhere for anyone to go except back to his gallery on Agura. Back to death. Still, not knowing where the threat was coming from, only that there was a threat, there would be no point in taking chances. Once it was used, his linking book would be left behind. So, after entering his store, he waited for the doors to sigh shut, then deliberately cut their power supply. Even if someone tried to come after him and his opulent wealth, they would be thwarted at the doors and die from that heinous cloud and its hideous death. Linking to his age, he was safe. Unfortunately, his family was not. When the explosions hit, Kadish immediately ran to a safe age, forsaking his family, friends, etc. Though he presumed they would show up someday, they never did. And as a result, he lived out the remaining days of his life in his age with his possessions. We don't know how long he waited for his family to show up, but obviously they never did. He tried to communicate with others through his key, but to no avail. No one was answering. Either they were too busy fleeing themselves, or they were already dead. Based on the screams he heard from the dying as that dark cloud passed over them, he was betting on the latter. Eventually he realized that he was alone in his age, alone in his mansion, alone in his immaculate gardens, and he would die alone. At some point, steeling his resolve, he opened each locked portion of his age as required, and reset all of the locks as he passed through. Finally reaching and entering his vault, he closed it behind him, sealing himself inside. He rested briefly, knowing that he would last only a matter of days with no food or water, possibly less, as we don't know if the vault had a ventilation system. It might have been only a matter of hours before a supply of oxygen ran out. At some point, stealing his resolve. Oh, I'm sorry, I just read that, didn't I? He picked up a quill and grabbed a sheet of paper. Looking about his possessions, taking in the sight for one last time, the self-proclaimed grower penned his final note. I have met my end. Mortality overwhelms me. I see its shadow. It is waiting and watching for my soul to depart. Its acquisitions surpass my own. There are linking books here, but I will not depart. I have decided. I am here with all I would desire. No one can take it from me. I will die here with them. This place is hidden and will remain hidden. If these words are found anyway, remember that I did not surrender. I did not die with nothing. I died with everything. Look at my possessions. They belong to me and will be with me forever. Peace. Guildmaster Kadish. Meanwhile, back in the cavern, in Denis, the cloud of death spread through the cavern. The people of the lower city choked the avenues to the public libraries, trying to escape. Those that couldn't make it died. The algae died. A third tremor struck, causing many buildings and houses to crumble and fall. By the time the yellow-brown cloud reached the opposite wall, the cavern was eerily silent. Death had spread its pall. After 9 days, Guildmaster Taman of the stonemasons sent his son, Huldref, back to Denis to see if it was safe. He never returned, leaving his pregnant wife to raise their as-yet unborn sons, Aaron and Hijaf. On the 10th day, Atris donned his mask and air cylinder and returned to Denis. He went immediately to the guild hall, only to find it empty. No guards, no guildsmen, nothing but the yellow-brown residue of the cloud that had settled everywhere and on everything. He found the book that would take him to the Guild Age, where the council had gone to gather and debate what should be done. The glow of the linking panel was dim with the outline of a handprint smudging the deadly residue. He wiped it clean, then linked. The age of the guilds appeared to be abandoned. There was no guard at the Lincoln cave. When he entered the great library of that age, he found them. The lords, the guild masters, his father, all dead. He found a scribe who died while writing in a ledger of records. Atris read his last entry. The body linked through on the second day after the quakes and cloud. They burned the body immediately, but the damage had been done. They all died shortly after. For you see, after 2 days, on Nisan 10, July 14th of 1744, 2 figures could be seen walking the streets of Denis. They were pushing a cart before them. On the cart were the bodies of the dead Denis. It was grisly work. As they collected their macabre cargo, they hauled it to the various libraries in the city, placing the hands of the dead on the linking panels of as many age books as they could find. In this way the devastation of the cavern would spread to all the ages of the Denis. In this way the fall would be complete. Atris buried his father, Callas, in that age. After saying the formal words of parting, he stood and said, "Goodbye, my father. May you find peace in the next age, and may Yahweh, the Maker, receive your soul." A guildsman from the ink makers showed up, Gelatus, and Atris warned him not to take off his breathing apparatus. Atris feared for Anna's and Gen's life. He donned his breathing mask again, and he and Gelatus linked back to Denis. When he got to his home, he saw that a body had been linked to the family age of Koa. Fearing the worst, he ran upstairs. There were footprints in the residue going into the room where the Book of Gemedet lay, but only part way, then turned and left. The book had been untouched. He gathered supplies for 8 days and left the house. He explored Denis and had seen Agarus and Viovis's handiwork, as well as the 2 villains with their cart of death. He found the evidence of their evil: explosives and empty canisters of the biological agent near the great ventilation fans of the cavern, and the bodies of the slain guards who were stationed at the fans. He explored further, noting the passages, finding his way among the ruins to the great shaft. He and Anna and Gen, would need this if they were to escape to the surface, the only true refuge left. He returned to Gemedet on Nisan 25, August 2nd, exhausted and out of air, and unfortunately infected with the plague, while he was still infected with the plague. While he was still in a feverish sleep, Gen barely acknowledged his mother, just briefly looking coldly at her before returning his gaze back to his father. When Anna told Gen that they must consider leaving Gamadet, Gen didn't even flinch, and sat there with a cold, hard expression on his face. It seemed that even then Gen blamed his mother for what had befallen his father. By the time Atris recovered 8 days later, 2 servants were dead, and so was his mother. On Nisan 18, Atris had buried his father. Now on Litar 1, August 8th, he buried his mother, saying, "Farewell, dear mother. You will be with me always." Then Gen bowed his head, saying, "Goodbye, grandmother. May we meet in the next age." It surprised Anna how much Gen had grown up these past few weeks. Atris, Anna, and Gen linked back to Denis. The algae in the lake had recovered somewhat, enough to bring twilight to the cavern. It was enough that they could see the magnitude of destruction. Though the yellow-brown residue remained over everything, the ventilation fans had swept the noxious cloud away and returned fresh air to the city. They made their way towards the harbor. Unfortunately, all the boats had been sunk. In addition, all the boathouses were burned, and even the barges had been sunk. It was obvious that someone didn't want them to get across. Leaving Atris to rest, Anna set off to find a boat. She returned a short while later, having found a solitary boat. Atris was suspicious, but the trio made their way for the boat anyways. Not halfway there, they heard someone cry out. Atris told Anna to take Gen to the boat while he investigated. After all, it might be Gelatis. Atris backtracked until he heard a soft groan nearby. He was in front of a tavern called the Blind Worm, and the sound was coming from upstairs. Slowly, partly due to caution and partly due to exhaustion from his illness, he made his way upstairs. He found the room that was the source of the moans. A man with a large meat cleaver buried in his back was struggling to get to the window. It was, of all people, Viovis. He and Agaris had had a disagreement, as Viovis had put it with irony in his voice and smile. Agaris had wanted him to write an age where the two of them could rule as gods. As far as he had fallen, he had refused to cross that final line, that of the ultimate heresy, to misuse the art of writing ages and confuse the ability to link to pre-existing worlds with that of true creation. When asked, Viovis admitted that it was he who had entered Atris's workroom, but had not contaminated Gamadet. He left that age alone because Anna had spoken out for him. It was as if there was a dark cloud in my head, he explained, poisoning my thoughts. I felt nothing. Nothing but hatred, anyway. Blind hatred. Of everything and of everyone. At that moment, they heard a shout from outside. It was Agaris, and he was sailing away in that last boat with Anna and Gen. Viovis urged Atrus to save her, and gave him a linking book to his family's age of Nider Gemat, from where he could link to his study in Kvir, the obvious destination of Egaris and his hostages. In the study was a book bound with a green cover that was the secret age where Egaris planned to go. Using the book from Viovis, Atrus arrived in Kvir ahead of the philosopher. He used his time wisely, setting a trap for the portly villain. Egaris had planned on locking Anna and Gen away in a cell and then going back to the harbor to deal with Atrus once and for all. After arriving on the docks of Kvir, they headed towards the house. Egaris and Anna caught the faint smell of something burning. Bellowing, Egaris ran for the upstairs bookroom, dragging Anna and Gen along behind by their bound hands. He yanked them into the bookroom, but Gen fell. Egaris slammed the door shut behind him, leaving Gen out in the hall. "My books!" he roared. All of them in the room were ablaze, save for the green-covered one. Egaris threatened to kill Anna if Atrus didn't return the green book. Atrus threatened to destroy the rest of the books in the green book's age if he didn't let Anna go. "And what will you have then, master philosopher?" "Nothing, now that you've killed Viovis." Egaris trembled with anger. He made one final threat to Anna's life. Atrus was smiling, and noted what a masterful work it was, that age. Egaris referred to it as Edorat. Atrus said, "No, Viovis had another name for it." Using an English name that he learned from Anna, he called it Beelzebub. Atrus's eyes met Anna's, and she mouthed the words, "I love you," to him. Atrus answered with his eyes, then placed his hand on the linking panel. Egaris thrust Anna to the side, then with an expression that was half smile and half snarl, he placed his hand on the linking panel to follow Atrus. This was the last link he would ever make. The trap that Atrus had set was in making critical changes to the Book of Edorat. It was no longer a beautifully written age. Rather, it was filled with a molten lava flow. Egaris desperately looked for the linking book back to Denis. Too late. The floor pitched forward, and the philosopher was thrown into the brilliant orange-red lava. Back in Denis, Anna was filled with anguish and the temptation to follow her beloved. Fortunately, there was a pounding on the door. It was Gen. She picked up the green book and placed it on the pile with the other burning books. Atrus' mother had described her relationship with his father as, quote, "the other book in her life," close quote, each one linking to the other, making a whole. Anna now stared at where the other book in her life had been. Returning to the door, she opened it and went to her son. Gen was unaware of the events in that bookroom, unaware that his father had given his own life that Gen and his mother might survive. He couldn't understand why his mother led them out of Denis, without waiting for his father. But leave they did. Following Atrus' notes, she and Gen made their way to the surface, to the cleft, to begin again. Please join us next week as we learn about Gen's growing up in the cleft and his rebellion against Anna. The end. Welcome, Rabbit. Welcome, Honora, Cave Woman, and Lucha. Welcome, Melm. Thanks, Dr. Chris. Thanks, Honora. I try to change it up a little bit. Thanks, Zizzy and Shiny Joe. Thanks, Potru. You're welcome, Kiwi. And yes, it is, Paige. Last week's story is my favorite story of all. This one is my second favorite story. Yes, there is, Caver. And since this was story number 52, we are exactly halfway through the history. And I'm going to close out the story right now.